In this lesson, we're going to look at adding members and accessor methods to classes when programming in an OOP style. And to do that, I'm going to look at lesson 63 in my book, Learn Scala 3 the Fast Way. In this lesson, we'll look at an object-oriented programming style class that also has private fields and methods. And as I note here, when they're defined inside a class, fields and methods are called class members or just members. So first up, I show this class, and it has a method named full name right here. And it returns a string, and that string is a concatenation of the first name and the last name. And before we move on, there's a couple of things to look at here. The first is that when you're defining members inside of a class like this one here, you want to put a colon at the end of the class definition there on the first line. And that indicates that the class is going to have a body here. And inside the class here, there could be one line like this one, or there could be 100 or several hundred. And then you can either leave the class like this, or you can add this closing end statement. So you would say end employee, because this is named employee. So you add end employee if you want. But this end statement is optional. And what I find is that if I have a short class definition, let's say it's 5 or 10 or maybe even 20 lines, I won't add this end statement. But the longer the class is, the more likely I am to use this end statement at the end. And now getting back to the full name method, I show here how we create an employee. And again, I do that by providing a first name and last name. So that's this variable here, the first name and last name here. And I should note again that these are var fields, so they will be mutable. So I create the employee, I print out those two fields here, then I update the fields here, and that again is because first name and last name are mutable. And now what's new is we have this full name method right here. So I call printline on that full name method, and it prints these new values, Elton John. So that's what we're going to keep looking at in this lesson, are members such as methods like this one, and we'll also look at fields as we go along. And before we move on, this last paragraph here notes that these are public methods by default. So full name defaults to a public method, and I'll show you the private keyword in just a few moments. And now to look at more members inside of a class, I went ahead and copied and pasted some information in here so you don't have to watch me type all this because these are things that we covered before. So I create one enum here. This one is called crust size, and it has these values, small, medium, large. I created a enum named crust type. It has those values, thin, thick, and regular. And then I create another enum named topping with these values. And then I import the values from those three enums right there in that line. After that, I know that we're going to be using an array buffer, so I import that as well. And then I start defining my pizza class here. And if one thing I could do here is add the end statement. So I'll say end pizza. So that's going to be the end of our class. And now what I want to do is start adding some members to the class inside here. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a field, and I'm going to call that one toppings. So I say private val, and this is going to be toppings, and that's going to be a new array buffer. And that's going to be an array buffer of, I skipped that part, to type topping. And because array buffer is mutable, I went ahead and made this a val field. So basically toppings is immutable, but the array buffer it points to can be mutated. And this is kind of a common pattern in object-oriented programming. And I'm going to add a comment here that this is a private field. And the next thing I want to do is start working with that private field, and I'm going to add some public members inside the class. So I will say public members inside the class, go here. And the first member I want to add is a method to let people add toppings. So I will say def add topping. And so it's going to take up topping as an input parameter, and because it's going to mutate that array buffer, it is going to return nothing. So we say that it returns unit, and you'll see what I mean here in a moment. So the array buffer is called toppings, and then we're going to say plus equal that topping. And so what this code does is it takes that array buffer and it says add this one topping to the existing array buffer. And I mentioned this before in earlier lessons, but that plus equal method is an alias for a method called add1. So if you find it more readable, you can use that. But in Scala code, you will typically see this, so that's what I'm going to go with right there. So that adds one topping. And next, I want callers to be able to add multiple toppings at one time, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that right there and paste that in. And I'll change this method name to add toppings. And now I can do that right there. And I'll take advantage of the varargs parameter syntax right here. So TS is my input parameter, and it's a varargs parameter of the type topping, and that just means you can have one or more, or actually technically 0 or more toppings that you can add with this syntax. And just to show you something different, I'm going to say append all those toppings like that. And again, that just lets users of our pizza class add multiple toppings at one time. So this method, they can add one topping, and with this one, they can add multiple toppings. Next up, we can create a method to let callers remove toppings. So we're going to call this one, and actually I'm going to just let them remove all toppings. How about that? So that will take no input parameters, and it returns nothing again because we're modifying the array buffer. And here we'll just call toppings.clear. So that gives users a way to remove all toppings at one time. And lastly, so you don't have to watch me type, I created a toString method here, and this uses a couple of different things that I've shown earlier. So we're creating an interpolated string with the letter S right there. We're also creating a multi-line string with the 3 double quotes right there. So this starts a multi-line string. I use this symbol right here to start each line, and then I call strip margin on that. So I discussed earlier in this course how that works, but this symbol right here takes care of this opening white space right there, so it's going to strip the margin. And the pipe symbol is a default symbol that strip margin looks for, so it's going to strip all this margin right over here, and then everything you see, all of this text right here, and then all of this text right here will be left just fine. And you'll see that in just a few moments. So now that we have all this pizza class code, we can go ahead and start creating a new pizza. And to do that, I'll create I'll call it a driver method. So this is going to be a main method as I annotate right there. And that's the beginning of our program. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but when I create these fields here for the pizza right there, we have this first parameter is named crust size, and the type is crust size, which was defined up here. And what I do here is I'm providing a default value for crust size. So if the caller doesn't provide any value, crust size is going to default to a medium. And then I do the same thing for crust type. So this is default value. And if it's not provided when someone creates a new pizza, it's going to default to regular. So now I come down here and I'm going to create a new pizza, and we'll just call this variable P. And I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to create a pizza without giving it any constructor parameters like that. And just to show you how you can mutate things, I will change that crust size. And I'm going to go ahead and make that one large. And then I'll update the crust type and make that thin. And now we can say on that pizza, I want to add just one topping. So let's add some cheese onto that. And then we can do that again and add some mushrooms right there like that. And now I can do a print line on our pizza, add a little spacing there. And so when I do print line on our pizza instance right there, that's what calls this toString method. And then we should see a formatted string that looks like this. So I'll go ahead and save that. And now when I look at the directory listing, you can see this is the file oop.scala right there. So I will use Scala CLI to run this. Scala CLI, oop.scala, does a little updating. And oops, made a couple mistakes here. If I was using an IDE, it would have caught those right away, but I'm just using a text editor, so let's go back and fix those. So I will correct these. And one thing I should note is I'm so used to programming in a functional style, I should have made these var fields, which is more of an object-oriented programming style. So the way this works is that these are constructor parameters, and they also work like fields. So this would be just like, maybe I say that this is very similar to having fields like this. So I could have defaulted that to regular there. And that would be very, very similar. But instead, I have these as constructor parameters here, and I'll try to show that in just a few minutes. But the key point is crust size and crust type work just like fields in this class, as you can see with what I'm doing right there. So changing those to var should get rid of the first couple of error messages. And then what do I have here? Not found P. So then this right here should be a this. So we save that. And this is very similar to what we do in Java. You refer to the current reference as this. And I think that's probably pretty similar to other languages as well. So if I got those right, we'll come back here and try to run this again. And there we go. And just to compare this output with what I did here, it says a large pizza with a thin crust. So this is what I did here. I created a large thin, and then the toppings are cheese and mushrooms. And that's what I have here, cheese and mushrooms. And just to show a different variation here, I will comment those guys out. And let's come up by here and then say that I want a medium and a thick right there like that. And come back over here, run that again. And now we see a medium pizza with a thick crust, which is exactly what I did. And the only thing I was trying to show here is passing those parameters into the pizza constructor. As a summary of adding members to OOP-style classes in Scala, let's take a look at our pizza class again. So start off with a definition of a class right here. We have these two constructor parameters. And again, I added these defaults for those two parameters. Then we open our class definition with this colon character right there. And then I started adding members. So these are fields and methods. So fields up here, methods down here. There's no standard there. You could put the fields at the bottom if you wanted to, but I find this to be more readable to do things in a top-down manner. And so I made this field private because I don't want anyone accessing this. So I added the private keyword right there. So we're the only ones that can access toppings. And just to show that, I could come down here and we can intentionally do an error. And so we could try to do like print line p.toppings. And again, if I had an IDE, you would see it fail right there. But now we'll just do that right here at the command line. And you see value toppings cannot be accessed. So here, we're outside of the class. We can't access that. But inside the class, these other methods, these public methods, can access toppings, as I show here, here, and here. And I should mention again that all of these methods are public by default. And if you want to make one of these methods private, you would just add the private keyword right there. But since I don't want that to be private, I will remove it. And so this is an introductory look at domain modeling in an object-oriented programming style in Scala, specifically Scala 3.